Pull up a chair, you guys, because today we're taking a deep dive into, a massive societal earthquake that happened entirely behind closed doors.
Yeah, right in the living room.
Exactly. We're looking at what happened when millions of boomer women entered the workforce, but the American home just, never renegotiated its
It
terms.
just stayed exactly the same.
Right. So we have this really fascinating stack of sociological history in front of us today. It's anchored primarily by Arlie Hochschild's landmark 1989 book, The Second Shift.
Which is such an incredible piece of research.
It really is. And we're backing that up with decades of time diary research from the Pew Research Center, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and some modern studies on cognitive labor.
Lots of data to get through.
Tons of data. But our mission today is really to understand how millions of couples tried to survive a revolution that just sort of stalled right at their own front doors. And we are looking at this with a lot of empathy.
We really are.
Yeah.
Because the goal here isn't to point fingers, right? We're not here to label anyone a bad husband or a demanding wife.
No, not at all.
We are looking at two people who were handed entirely incompatible life scripts. And they were just trying to make it work. I mean, she was raised for one world and hired into another, while he was raised on this, 1950s script that no one ever formally revoked.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the way this was sold to the public was wildly different from the reality. Like, picture a television set in 1980. There's this commercial for Unjoli perfume.
Oh, I know exactly the one you...
Right. You have a blonde woman in this crisp, powerful business suit just strutting confidently across the screen.
Yeah.
And there's this incredibly catchy jingle playing, promising that she can, went home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never, ever let her husband forget he's a man.
It's just wild to think about now.
It was this glossy, high-energy image of the 1980s supermom.
But the camera always stops before we see what actually happens next. The advertising conveniently leaves out this massive structural detail. Nobody in that commercial is asking who is watching the children, or who's scrubbing that frying pan, or who is folding the laundry during... hours 9 through 24 of that woman's day.
Exactly. While Hollywood and Madison Avenue were selling that superwoman fantasy, Arlie Hochschild, she's a sociologist from Berkeley, she was actually sitting in people's kitchens.
Yeah, she wanted to see the reality.
She wanted to see what happened when that 24-hour woman hit hour 14 of her day. And this wasn't just like a mail-in survey.
Oh, far from it. I mean, she did incredible immersive work. She and a research collaborator, Ann Machung, they interviewed about 50 dual-earner couples in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Wow, 50.
Yeah, but then she went even further. She actually shadowed a dozen families right into their homes.
That's dedication.
It really is. She observed dinner time, bath time, the subtle body language during chores, and, those tense 11 o'clock negotiations over who actually gets up with the crying baby.
And from those kitchen table observations, she coined a concept that really frames everything we're talking about today. She called it the stalled revolution.
The stalled revolution.
Yeah. Women migrated into the workforce in massive numbers. I mean, it was one of the great demographic shifts of the century. But men didn't migrate into the home at anywhere near the same rate.
Yeah.
And on top of that, employers were just entirely oblivious. They still acted as if every single worker had a stay-at-home wife handling all the domestic logistics.
Yeah, that structural blindness is just key here. The workplace didn't change its demands at all. A 40-hour week was still designed for a single breadwinner who didn't have to worry about, pediatrician appointments or grocery runs.
It's essentially like being hired for a second full-time job without being allowed to quit your first one.
That's a great way to put it.
And instead of anyone acknowledging that the system itself is structurally unworkable, everyone just pretends you just need, better time management skills.
Just buy a better planner.
Exactly. It took this massive systemic failure and disguised it as a personal problem to be fought out over the laundry basket.
And because it was disguised as a personal problem, couples fought it out in total isolation.
Yeah.
Which is why, to really understand the emotional toll of this, we need to spend some real empathetic time with a specific couple from Hochschild's study.
I think so, too.
She used pseudonyms for them, of course, Nancy and Evan Holt.
This story completely grounds the sociology in reality for me. So Nancy is a 30-year-old social worker. She identifies as a feminist, and she is absolutely terrified of repeating her mother's life.
Right, because her mother really struggled.
Yeah, her mother suffered from this deep, depressed housewifery, and Nancy desperately wants an egalitarian marriage so she can avoid that exact fate.
And then you have Evan. Now, Evan is a furniture salesman, and it is so important to note that Evan genuinely loves Nancy. He is
Yes.
proud of her career. He's proud of her intelligence.
Yeah.
But his internal operating system is just completely different. He is running on the 1950s script that he inherited from his father. What's fascinating here is that in Evan's worldview, he is providing by working. And the house, along with their 4-year-old son, Joey, is fundamentally Nancy's domain.
Which is what he was taught.
Exactly. He isn't a tyrant. He is just bewildered that the rules changed on him.
So they clash relentlessly, like for years. Nancy tries everything to make the workload fair. She makes lists, she sets up schedules, she proposes alternating weeks of cooking and cleaning.
She really tries.
She does. And the fascinating, frustrating part is that Evan agrees to all of it. He doesn't say no, but then he just forgets.
Oh, the forgetting.
Yeah, or he delays doing the dishes until the food is crusted on, or he does the laundry but leaves it to wrinkle in the dryer.
Which is exactly what Hochschild identified as passive resistance.
Yeah.
Or, as it's often called in household dynamics, needing reminding.
Needing reminding.
Yeah, it is a highly effective way of maintaining the old boundaries without ever having an outright aggressive confrontation. He agrees in principle, but refuses in practice.
Right. And this passive resistance just pushes Nancy to the absolute brink. The marriage is buckling under the weight of this resentment, but they have a kid, they love each other on some level, and neither of them actually wants a divorce.
Right, they want to stay together.
So instead of resolving the core conflict, they invent a solution that allows them to stop fighting. They decide to divide the house. Nancy takes the upstairs, and Evan takes the downstairs.
And we really need to translate this into kitchen language because upstairs and downstairs, it sounds perfectly mathematically equal.
It sounds totally fair.
It sounds like a fair compromise, yeah.
It sounds fair until you realize what the physical geography of their house actually is. Like, Nancy's upstairs included the living room, the kitchen, the bedrooms, the bathrooms, and the daily, hourly care of their 4-year-old son, Joey.
Which is basically the whole house.
It is. And the absolute absurdity of this is what Evan claimed as his half. Nancy took the entire functioning household, and Evan took the garage and the dog.
The dog.
I mean, that's not a solution. That's a hostage negotiation.
It really is. Hochschild called this a family myth. It wasn't a real division of labor. It was a story they told themselves, so they could call it sharing and keep the marriage intact.
Wow.
Nancy had to do intense emotional work to convince herself this was fair. She had to consciously reframe the inside of the house as her chosen domain just to survive the daily resentment of doing it all.
But burying the resentment didn't make it disappear. That tension has to go somewhere. And tragically, it went straight into Joey.
Yeah, the kids always feel it.
They do. This 4-year-old kid absorbed all that unspoken, subterranean conflict. He became so anxious that he couldn't fall asleep without his mother until 11 o'clock at night.
That is so late for a 4-year-old.
The fight didn't end. It just moved out of the kitchen and into the child's nervous system.
That underground tension was everywhere in the homes Hochschild studied, and it often wildly contradicted what couples explicitly claimed to believe.
How so?
Well, the ideologies they professed, whether they said they were traditional or egalitarian, it rarely lined up neatly with their actual behavior at home.
The contradictions in the study are just wild. Like, look at Carmen and Frank Delacourt.
Oh, they are a perfect example.
Right. Carmen is a proud traditionalist. She runs a home daycare, and she explicitly wants Frank to be the unquestioned head of the household. She completely believes in the old script. Yet in practice, she actually gets Frank to do way more housework than Nancy ever got from Evan.
Because she employs a completely different gender strategy.
Exactly. She uses strategic incompetence.
Oh, that's a good phrase.
She doesn't ask Frank to do half the chores because it's fair. She pretends she physically or mentally can't do them. She acts like she can't figure out how to balance the checkbook, or she's just too clumsy to handle the sharp bread knife, or, she can't reach the high shelves.
Right.
By playing helpless, Frank's help becomes a rescue mission. It preserves his masculine authority rather than threatening it like a chore chart would.
And if we contrast that with another couple, Nina and Peter Tanagawa, we see the exact opposite strategy used for the exact same protective reasons.
What were they doing?
In their case, Nina's career outpaced Peter's. She out-earned him and had more status. But instead of that financial power translating into leverage to get him to do more at home, both of them worked delicately to shrink her success.
They practically apologized for it. They treated his career as the real one, like the primary one, even though the math said otherwise, just to protect his ego and keep the 1950s story of their marriage intact.
Exactly. Hochschild uncovered this hidden ledger system underneath all these daily interactions. She called it the economy of gratitude.
The economy of gratitude.
Yeah, the currency in a marriage isn't just money. It's what you feel you owe your partner and what you feel they owe you.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Reading through this, I kept thinking of it like a physics problem.
A physics problem.
Yeah, think about the 1980s. When a husband actually stepped up and did the dishes, his baseline was his own 1950s father who never set foot in the kitchen.
Right, the bar was on the floor.
Exactly. So when that husband washed a plate, he was defying gravity. It was an anomaly. And because it defied gravity, it required profound thanks and gratitude from his wife.
Ah, I see. But when the wife did the dishes...
That was just physics. That's gravity pulling water down the drain.
Yeah.
It was entirely expected, natural, and zero applause was required.
That makes perfect sense.
Her baseline wasn't a 1950s father. Her baseline was her mother, who did everything. So the ledgers were completely asymmetrical. She could be doing 80% of the work, but if her husband did 20%, she might feel guiltily fortunate compared to her peers just because he was helping.
So if the feelings in the ledgers were this complicated, we really have to look at what the actual math was on paper?
Yeah.
Because Hochschild famously put a concrete number on this exhaustion.
Right, the famous stat.
She claimed that when you combine paid work, housework, and childcare, employed wives were working an extra month of 24-hour days every single year compared to their husbands.
Yeah.
An entire 13th month of unpaid labor.
Extra month. Just let that sink in for a second.
But here is where we must be scrupulously precise with the data. That specific formulation, the extra month, was real arithmetic based on the sources she had. But it was almost certainly an overestimate, even when the book was published in 1989.
Wait, how did she arrive at a number that large if it was an overestimate?
Well, she derived it by averaging major time use studies from the 1960s and 1970s. But time diary research is a constantly evolving science. Later researchers looked back at this.
And what did they find?
By 2009, sociologists Milky, Rowley, and Bianchi analyzed the most precise data for the exact same demographic. So dual-earner parents with preschoolers. They found that the gap in the total workload was about a week and a half per year, not a month.
Okay, a week and a half of pure 24-hour days is still a massive, exhausting amount of unpaid labor to carry entirely on your own shoulders. But you're right, it is a very different picture than a full extra month.
It is, and the data continued to evolve.
Yeah.
If you look at time diaries from 1997 and later Pew data from 2013, we actually see a push toward parity in total hours.
Really?
Yeah. When you add up paid employment and unpaid home labor, the workloads in dual-earner homes became almost identical. Mothers were clocking about 59 total hours a week, and fathers were at 58 total hours.
Wait, 59 to 58. I'm looking at these Pew numbers, and that feels incredibly misleading. Like, any mother listening to you right now is going to throw her phone across the room hearing that total. Does that mean the second shift was a myth? What is that data hiding?
That is the crucial caveat, and you are entirely right to push back on that. The totals converged, but the composition of that time never did. The asymmetry survived in two distinct ways: the inflexibility of the work and the leisure gap.
Okay, break down the inflexibility part for me, because an hour of work isn't just an hour of work.
Exactly. Men's contributions heavily clustered in discretionary chores. Things like mowing the lawn on a Saturday, or cleaning out the garage, or fixing a leaky faucet.
Right, stuff you can put off.
Yes. These are tasks that can be delayed if you're tired, or pushed to the weekend. Women, on the other hand, were doing the non-deferrable daily core chores.
Like cooking.
Yeah. You cannot tell a screaming, hungry toddler on a Tuesday evening that you will feed them on Saturday. You can't put off packing a school lunch. The time pressure is entirely different. One allows for autonomy, the other is a relentless daily grind.
Right. The stakes of the tasks are completely mismatched. And what about this leisure gap? How does that factor into the 59 versus 58 hours?
Well, because of that intense daily time pressure and the fact that mothers multitasked far more, mixing childcare with cooking and cleaning, fathers ended up with roughly 3 more hours of pure, uninterrupted leisure time per week.
3 extra hours.
Largely spent watching television or relaxing.
Yeah.
So the total hours look similar on a spreadsheet, but the lived experience, the pure exhaustion, was profoundly unequal.
Which perfectly explains the part of the second shift that doesn't even show up on a traditional time diary. The invisible work.
Yes, the mental load.
I'm thinking of those exhausted wives who kept the pediatrician appointments organized in their heads, who noticed the milk was low before it ran out, who realized that a growth spurt meant new shoes needed to be bought before the weekend.
It's constant.
Today, we call that the mental load.
Yes, the invisible third shift. baked right into the second shift. Now, we should clarify that Hochschild didn't coin the exact term mental load. She actually gave us emotional labor in an earlier book, but she was absolutely observing this exact cognitive burden in those Bay Area kitchens.
So track this lineage for me, because the mental load feels like a phrase that just suddenly appeared in our vocabulary a few years ago, but clearly people have been studying it for decades.
It has a very rich history. A French sociologist named Monique Heiko called it la charge mentale way back in 1984.
Wow, 1984.
Yeah. Then in 1996, sociologist Susan Walser published a pivotal study called Thinking About the Baby. And that documented how mothers carried the worry and the planning even when the physical tasks were split. But you're right, it exploded into everyday household English around 2017.
That was the viral comic, right?
Yes, a comic called You Should Have Asked by a French cartoonist named Emma.
I remember reading that comic and it just clicking immediately. It perfectly captured the frustration of a partner standing in a messy kitchen saying, well, you should have asked me to help.
Right.
Which inherently implies that the woman is the default project manager of the home. The man is just a contractor waiting for orders.
Exactly. The burden of noticing what needs to be done is work in itself. And in 2019, sociologist Alison Daminger formally categorized this cognitive labor. She broke it down into 4 distinct stages:
What are they?
anticipating, identifying, deciding, and monitoring.
Okay, let's put that into a real-world scenario. Let's say a kid's school project.
Perfect. So
Yeah.
anticipating is realizing the science fair is coming up next month. Identifying is figuring out what materials are needed, poster board, glue, markers.
Right.
Deciding is choosing when to go to the store and what brand to buy. And monitoring is checking in 3 days before the fair to make sure the kid actually finished it.
And Deminger's research confirmed what everyone suspects, right? Women overwhelmingly handle the bookends.
Yes, they do.
They do the anticipating and the monitoring. The husband might drive to the store and buy the poster board, which is the deciding phase, but only because the wife anticipated the need and will have to monitor the progress later. It is an exhausting, infinite loop of project management.
And that cognitive loop is why the mental load is so draining.
Mm.
But if we look at the modern scorecard, we do actually see shifts. We have American Time Use Survey data stretching all the way to 2025.
Oh, please tell me we've made some real progress here.
We genuinely have. The newest data, covering 2003 to 2023, shows real convergence. Men's core housework, so cooking, cleaning, laundry, it rose from 3.5 hours a week to 5.6 hours.
Okay, that's something.
And the gender ratio for laundry specifically collapsed from 9-to-1 down to 3-to-1. Younger men are stepping up and doing the daily, non-deferrable tasks their fathers completely avoided.
Okay, a 3-to-1 ratio on laundry is a massive generational shift. That is real progress. But I don't know, I feel like there has to be a catch. Why do so many couples still feel like they're drowning? Let's look at the 2023 Pew data on equal earners.
This is where the psychological friction really shows up. The 2023 Pew data looks specifically at egalitarian marriages. These are couples where the husband and wife bring in the exact same amount of money.
Okay.
You'd assume this is the finish line for equality. The structural excuse is gone.
Right, if you earn the exact same amount, you should logically split the chores down the middle.
But even in those equal earning marriages, wives still do over twice the housework. It's 4.6 hours a week compared to his 1.9 hours. And the husband still gets about 3.5 more hours of leisure.
Unbelievable.
It gets even deeper. In marriages where the wife is the primary breadwinner, she still does more housework. Half a century after boomer women punched into the first shift, no earnings arrangement has been invented that buys a wife an equal second shift. The cultural script is just that stubborn.
So, what does this all mean for the women who lived through it? Because this wasn't just about being tired or annoyed about vacuuming. This burden landed right at the hinge point of boomer women's careers.
It really did.
The years when you are supposed to make a partner or build a medical practice or get tapped for the leadership track, those are the exact same years a household with young children demands the absolute maximum amount of unpaid labor.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this explains why the grand promise of the workplace we talked about in earlier deep dives just began to leak away. The husband could give everything to the first shift, the paid job, because his wife was covering the second shift at home.
Right.
But she couldn't give everything to the first shift because no one was covering the second shift for her.
So women had to accommodate a system that refused to accommodate them. The Pew data shows the cost. 42% of mothers reduced their work hours to care for family, compared to just 28% of fathers.
That's a huge gap.
Even more starkly, 27% of mothers quit a job entirely. They absorbed the part-time penalties, the lost promotions, the thinner pensions. Millions of women essentially paid for the stalled revolution out of their own lifetime earnings.
Which brings us gently back to the kitchen table, where we started today. Think back to Nancy and Evan Holt. Remember how their struggle over the upstairs and the downstairs didn't actually vanish?
It just went underground.
Yeah.
Nancy took on the emotional labor of pretending it was fair, and the tension bled right into their kids' anxiety.
Now multiply that buried tension by an entire generation. Millions of couples, married in the 1970s and 80s, both raised on scripts written in 1955. She was told she could have it all. He was never told anything had changed.
Nobody handed either of them a revised contract.
Exactly. Wives who felt the housework division was unfair reported statistically higher odds of divorce. That unresolved resentment didn't just disappear into the ether. It aged. It marinated for decades.
And that explosive resurfacing, when decades of unwritten contracts finally come due and the kids are out of the house, is exactly what we will explore in part 6 of our series, The Gray Divorce Revolution.
This raises an important question to leave you with today. What happens to a society when its most fundamental structural shifts, massive changes in the economy, the workforce, and gender roles, are just dismissed as personal arguments to be fought out over who folds the laundry?
Just like that glossy 24-hour woman in the perfume ad, we admired the image, but we never solved the reality. Like and subscribe, it really helps the channel reach others.